Awesome. We're live. So, welcome to another Run Wild with Us. Ask Chris and Lisa anything. I'm Lisa Kastner, and I am the founder and CEO of Running Wild, which includes Running Wild Press and RIZE. And I am here with Chris Major, who is the acquisitions editor for RIZE, as well as one of our amazing editors. So, we are here with you every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time to answer whatever questions you may have. If you are watching this, it is not Wednesday between 4 and 5 or 7 and 8 p.m., then this is not a big deal. You can just go ahead, throw your questions in the comments, because Chris and I always check during the course of the week to see if there's any new questions that anyone's brought forward. And we are more than happy to cover them in the subsequent session. So with that, Chris and I actually were just now talking about the benefits of having a mentor. And we just figured we'd start off this today talking about either those who've influenced us or, if like I'm a mentor, believe it or not, for multiple authors, either affiliated with an actual organization or independently, just because I think it's incredibly important to help one another. Um, so with that, Chris, who, in terms of your own writing career, who do you feel has been like really influential and why?
There's different people for different reasons. As far as like craft, I had a poetry professor in undergrad
Mhm.
who, his approach to, I guess, kind of how he, I hate to say graded our creative writing pieces, because it's kind of hard to grade something as subjective as creative writing, but his approach to his critiques is something that is, I mean, vital to my process as a writer, vital to my process and how I kind of craft work. Now, in retrospect, and because I have a friend who that professor was also a mentor to, he didn't like my work that much. If he didn't give grades, but the reason he was so strict on it is because he thought it was crap. I just took that.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, but I took that approach and thought, oh, he's just like engaging me, or he's just like, But and it's how I look at my work now, and it helped. The way I edit, the way I do line edits, how closely I look at language. Um, but I mean, for grad school, he wrote my letter of recommendation, all that. So he must not have thought it was too bad, but he was pretty tough on me as far as craft. But um, outside of craft, somebody who's mentored me. It's really funny. I was talking to that professor, and he said, books are the best mentor for kind of
mm,
writing wise, reading people and stuff like that. So most of mine just comes from reading the works of other authors, and you've been very helpful in teaching me kind of you yourself and teaching me the ins and outs of publishing and kind of how the production side of it, the just things I didn't know, just being a writer, um, and then there's one in my creative writing program. That now he recruited me to go to the program, and there's just kind of some things he's um, let me know about MFA programs, let me know about certain stuff. So um, yeah, just anytime someone can give you information that can help support or guide you through like kind of wherever you are in your career, those relationships are extremely important. So definitely, I think everyone. I think I was watching Wall Street, the second Wall Street movie, and Josh Brolin's character said that um, he said that every man should have two things in his life: a mentor and a mentee at some point. And I always
mm.
thought I always thought that was really good, and I kind of believe that too.
Yeah, me too. World Wanda says, my record is 18. Worldo, could you do me a favor and put in the comments more specifically what you're referencing? Because you also commented you're very forthcoming with information for me, guys. Hey, man, let us know what exactly it is that your question is, and we're more than happy to address it. I mean, as long as it's nothing obscene or whatever. So,
Right.
um, back to Chris. So, Chris, it's interesting because I've found that in the creative world, there always tends to be two schools of thought. One is like everybody's competition, right? And the other is that we're all one big community and we should all be here to help one another and learn from each other. And I personally believe more in the latter, that we're all one big community and we should all be here to help one another, because you learn from reading, you learn from writing, you learn from doing things like being a reader for publications, and then finding out based on working with other editors and other writers what they would accept in, to publish, and what they
Right.
wouldn't and why. And it's interesting because I have encountered authors who are very much more along the lines of like everybody's competition. And I honestly kind of feel sorry for them because because of the fact that he's always going to feel alone. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they'll never have that feeling that there's others that you can go to. Don McIntyre says a good writer's critique group can be invaluable too. My group and I have learned so much from one another. That's true. And it's interesting. You also need to be careful about your critique group, because I remember like the very first critique group I went to, a friend of mine had told me that like it was a really great critique group. And the feedback that was provided on some of the pieces, it was obvious that it was more of like a personal preference in terms of story. And you're not if you're really really new in writing and you're not really super confident in your skills, that can really impact your writing and your writing style, and not necessarily in a good way. So I think a lot of it is finding the critique group that's right for you, and for your own style.
Yeah.
Worlda Wanda says, how many full-size Bic lighters can Chris fit in his suitcase? It must have been censored, my original question. Sorry, guys. And then Worlda's like says, dang censorship. Am I right? So
Yeah. That's funny. I mean, I can fit. I don't know. I haven't tried. I'd have to spend a Saturday trying to figure out how many big lighters I could fit in there. So.
yep. Yeah, I don't know that I would be able to answer that question either. So back to the whole mentor mentee thing. So coming up, for me, mentors have been invaluable, and not just in writing, but in general. And the
Right.
reason is, I think we all go through periods where things just aren't happening, right? Like no matter what you do, you could be, so specifically around writing, you could be writing all the time and you're submitting your work out, and all you get are rejections, or and it's not for any good reason, right? It's not like the work, it needs work. It's more like the responses are, oh, it's okay, it's just not
Yeah.
for us, or whatever the case may be. And when you go through the long periods like that, eventually you start saying to yourself, like, can I write? Do I know what I'm doing? And I have been blessed in that when I've hit those, bottom points, there's always been someone who has come forward and who's familiar with my writing, and who's come, and they actually, I say 90% of the time, they had no idea that I was in a downward period. Um, Came forward and were like, I love your writing. It's fantastic. I want to publish it, or, whatever the case may be. And one such period was like one of the first writers conferences I ever went to was the Philadelphia Writers Conference. And this was back in like 2001. And I had submitted I had submitted the opening. Sorry, I'm thinking about this. No, I submitted a short story. And for the way that it was structured was you submitted a piece, and then your workshop leader would review it and give you feedback. And my my workshop leader actually pulled me aside at the end of the second day, and he had given me, the feedback on my piece. But he pulled me aside. And he said, I really need to talk to you. So I was like, okay. And I had submitted this short story for competitions, and it didn't even make it to like the final rounds, right? Like it didn't get placed, nothing. And he's like, I really just wanted to tell you that you're a great writer, and you need to keep writing. I can see it in your story. I can see it in the way that you write. You're really passionate about both narrative and craft. And that was the first time anybody had acknowledged that. And it really, at that juncture, it meant the world to me um because I had been writing for a while. I mean, I think Chris, I'm sure you can relate to this. Like wrote in high school, I wrote in college. When I was in college and in high school, I also did a lot of journalism as well. And for whatever reason, when I wrote fiction, it just didn't take off. And there comes a point where, at least for me, you start thinking, well, okay, so I can write a story, right? Like I can write a journalism article, but I guess I don't know how to write a narrative. I don't know how to write fiction. So, excuse me. And I can write business essays. I've had all that kinds of stuff published without
Right.
any difficulty. So it always got to a point where I thought, well, I guess I can't write fiction, or I can't write memoir, because it just like wouldn't get published every time I tried. And every time I would hit that point, that downward cycle, there was someone like the instructor that I just mentioned who would come forward and just say, "No, you're really good. You know what you're doing. Just
Yeah.
keep going." And I know that's hard, right? I'm bringing it up because I know that alone is really, for me, what made me know that there's always someone that you can help, right? So, to me, it's always been very important to be a mentor to others, and to help them in whatever capacity it may be. And the other thing I realized too, a lot of people who I'm gonna say this and it'll sound glub, but anybody can start a publication, like literally.
Yeah.
If you can get your own website and you can start a WordPress or a blog, then you can start your own online publication. Anybody, uh, and pretty much anybody can also start an in-print publication as well. It just depends on if you're willing to do the homework and the research and all that, right?
Right.
So there's nobody, there's no one sitting down with a checklist saying, okay, before you start this publication, you need to have done this amount of work, uh, studied this much craft. Here's all your criteria. And once you realize that, it actually makes feedback that you do or don't get make a lot more sense, right? So what I mean by that is, sometimes you're going to get feedback where someone's like, well, I don't like that the main character has pink hair, and so we're rejecting it. What does that have to do with anything? It doesn't, right? So I think too, one really important thing as a mentor is that by being a mentor, I believe when you give feedback, you have to give reasons for the feedback, right? Like whether it be craft, whether it be you treat it as a job, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So like as if you were working for if you're working for the New York Times, if you were working for the Harvard Business Review, if you were working for, you know, a short story publication, whatever the case may be, the expectation in those environments is that when you give feedback, you have justifications for it, for those recommendations.
Yeah.
And so, as a mentor, the benefit for you personally as being a mentor is it can force you to really think about the feedback that you're providing in much more of a craft way or narrative way. And because of that, it forces you to actually give that feedback within that framing. And what that does, and I'm also saying this too for those who have mentors or who get feedback when they submit something. And if they don't give you those justifications, be wary. If you read the feedback and you're like, this doesn't make sense to me, then be wary of it. Because this person may not actually be well versed in craft. They
Right.
may not
Right.
actually be well versed in narrative. They may not be well versed in the genre that you're writing in or in the genre style that you're writing in. And if they're not, then they could be giving you really bad feedback, but they're presenting it as in the context of them being an authority figure. And so that can really screw you up. So,
Yeah.
you know, I go back to what the feedback or the guidance that Chris that you were provided by the one instructor saying, who said, you know, really reading is the way you learn. If you get feedback, it could be from a mentor or a peer or anyone, and you're like, I don't know that I agree with this, then go back and study novels or stories or short stories or whatever the case may be that you are a fan of that's within the same genre styling that you write in, and compare your writing to that, meaning from like what kind of narrative techniques you're using, that kind of thing, because it may be that the person who gave you this feedback is wrong, right?
Yeah. Um.
And so you need to keep an open mind in terms of that. So
Yeah. Yeah. And with the mentor thing you're talking about, you know, somebody's. Well, I'll go back to what you said initially about noticing that somebody is kind of, or when you may feel like you're in a rut and just having that mentor come to you and say, hey, like, you are talented. It's not, that you are a good writer. Keep writing. That is important. And I think because I had an instructor that was really similar um, back in undergrad. I went to two colleges. And so at my first one, I had an instructor who she kind of, I don't know, she was my creative writing professor, and I wrote a lot of stuff in her classes and things. And one day she told me, you're a really good writer. That was all she said. She didn't go into detail, but it did make me feel a lot better, knowing that kind of, and that's kind of a thing with mentors. Sometimes it's perfectly well timed, and nobody, they just say it out of the blue. Because mentors, that relationship isn't just for the mentee. Mentor-mentee relationships are good for the mentor too. Like it's something to give their knowledge, their insights, their information to help someone else. And you get something from that. You get something from sharing what you've learned with someone so that they can go off and they can go be successful. Because then you get to have this kind of selfish feeling like, oh, I had something to do with that. Or, they're doing well, maybe because it's a small bit of encouragement or this tidbit of information I gave them kind of help them progress. And you get to sit back and you get to look and say, hey, I, have I had something to do with that. So that relationship isn't just for the mentee as far as the mentee taking information or taking something and just kind of going about their own. That mentor wants to do that, wants to be there. And as far as getting critique on your work that you may not understand or it may be harsh or you don't like, all art is subjective. What somebody it's kind of like I had a art professor, art history professor say, someone raised their hand and said, "How do you determine how much a sculpture or a painting or visual art is worth. And she said it depends on who's buying it. That's how you determine, the worth of art. And I think that extends to writing too. Yeah, there's like flat fees for books and articles and all stuff like that. But as far as how much someone loves something or likes something or dislikes something, that's just the eye of the beholder. That's so, again, I had a story, a fiction story that I was told needed to be deep in rewrite, and I was down about it. But a month later, the very next month, my it got picked up. I didn't change it or anything like that. It got picked up. So, and I know I've brought that little anecdote up a lot, but that's just really how it is. But it is important to have those mentors to kind of shepherd you a little bit when you slip a little bit or you may be in a funk. It's nice to have those mentors to kind of let you know that the storm isn't as bad as I've seen you a little bit farther down. The storm isn't as bad as you think it is. So that is crucial.
Yep. And also, don't forget, and this is true of mentors or anybody in the industry, if no one knows everything, period,
Yeah.
right? I don't care if the person has been in the same industry for 20, 30 years. No one knows everything. So, and in my mind, a good mentor or is going to acknowledge when they don't know something and either seek out someone who can answer your question or can help you, or they may already know someone else who can answer your question and who can help you. And with that in mind, then what that means is a good mentor, a good person who's here to help you is going to point you in the direction of that individual.
Right.
I mean, because that's what you need. Again, it takes a village, and we should all be here to help one another.
Right.
So yeah,
I agree.
and honestly, like every day, we've had Running Wild for 5 years. It'll be 5 years in June. Oh, it is June. Okay, it's 5 years. And you know, I I learn something new every day because every publication behaves a little bit differently. A lot of times it's dependent on how they came up or how they started or how long they've been around, right? All that kind of stuff. Uh, everybody has a different experience in terms of what they've worked in or how they've worked in it. If they've worked in multiple different types of storytelling. And, you've got to have an open mind and just be willing to listen and hear when someone comes forward and says, oh, well, I wouldn't do it that way. I would do it this way. And this is why,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And I'm going to keep saying this. The key is this is why. Because if someone just comes to you and says, don't do it that way, do it this way, and they don't have a justification, and it's clear, or when they give you the justification, it's clear within the justification that they don't actually understand your storytelling or the genre that you're writing in, then be wary of the feedback. So
Yeah. Yeah. Always.
okay, so go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just, yeah, I was just gonna say, any kind of feedback like that, there does need to be a why. Because one, without a why, it doesn't. There's no. I'd be leery, like you said, because did you even think about the piece? Did you even read it and pay attention to it, or are you just saying no to the piece? Given that why, or when people give that why, it shows that they're engaged, they have engaged, and they've given thought to why something does or does not work. So that why is important.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting because too, like, so I obviously also an editor for Running Wild, right? So 'cause I usually do the short story collections, and if someone asks for me to edit their longer piece, whether it's a novel or a memoir, I'll do it. Just a heads up that it's probably gonna be a little while because my plate tends to be kind of full. But my the editing technique that I actually recommend to all of our editors when they're looking at the piece for craft as well as for narrative is to ask leading questions. And the reason that I do that is because sometimes you don't know, right?
Right.
And if if a leading question, if something about the story comes forward to the reader and the author hasn't thought of it, just saying, what about just saying, do X, Y, and Z, the author may not understand why you're providing that guidance. But if you ask leading questions, it forces the author to actually think more deeply regarding that portion of the piece and to think along the lines of whatever that question is. And sometimes they've thought about it, right? And they'll come back and the response that they give will make it clear that they have actually thought about whatever it is that you're bringing forward, which is great. And then it's been addressed, right? And
Right.
sometimes the way they'll respond is by revising whatever it is, or adding a little bit, or whatever the case may be, so that it's clear that, what, this is actually, it's a great leading question, right? And it really enriches the story.
Right.
So,
Right.
mm,
Right. So yeah, no, with that, but with leading questions, again, even in a place kind of in getting feedback, those leading questions can help. Again, I said shepherd people along, and even uh, but feedback can get kind of tricky, just in that it so much depends on like who's talking to who, their communication styles, um, and kind of there's a trust in that when someone is offering feedback or when somebody is receiving feedback, there's a trust that there's kind of this I'm not gonna say authority, but there's this expertise or something that this person has that you know uh, you trust what they say. So and then again, we put weight in that, but we should also understand that when you give somebody that kind of authority to offer critique or insight, that again, like you said, they may not necessarily be experts on it, but typically they typically, we look at them that way, and it is important to understand that they have their even some blind spots too. Like again, like um, feedback is so tricky. It's subjective, I guess, um, but yeah, I just sometimes people put kind of a million pounds of weight on feedback in situations where it may not always be um, that heavy. If that makes any sense, I don't know. But but yeah, so I just think with feedback and stuff, I think some people may get discouraged, or if it's too harsh in their opinion, or even they may get too much of a high if it's good, because I'm a firm believer in writing is that something can always be made better in the work, um, and sometimes there's good feedback, and people will kind of rest on that when can this piece be better than it currently is. It may be good, but can it be great? And I think
mm-hmm.
that's important too. Our the way we receive feedback is definitely as important as the feedback that we get.
Yep, agreed. Worlda says, I'm writing a story about a Guatemalan lady of the evening, but 50 years later, and she's retired and telling her story in the same sort of style as the Titanic movie. There's love, tragedy, and suspense and redemption arc that'll knock your socks off. What do you think? Worlda, I think if you want, you should go ahead and send it to us at runningwildpress.submittable.com. You would just submit it under the Running Wild Press for full-length nonfiction or fiction, and we'll check it out.
Yeah,
So,
that'd be great.
and then Worlda also says, is Chris related to Charlie Major? I don't think so.
Charlie Major? No, I don't know who's Charlie Major. I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't have a Charlie in my family. No.
Yeah. And then also happy 5 years. Thank you. Yes, we are very proud to be here for 5 years. 5 years came pretty fast, surprisingly. So, and we are actually in the middle right now of doing things like switching distributors. So hopefully you'll be able to find, although you can find our books wherever, anywhere actually. But with the new distributor, we also get a sales force. So instead of us having to go to bookstores and convince them that to please pick up our stories, with this sales force, they'll be there uh, pitching our books to those retailers as well. So again, hopefully you'll find our books much more frequently, which would be awesome. So cool. Okay, so we're at like our halfway mark. And for those of you who may be newly joining us, I'm Lisa Kastner. I am the founder and executive editor, CEO of Running Wild, which includes Running Wild Press and RIZE. And I'm here with Chris Major, who is the acquisitions editor for RIZE. And by the way, we're both editors as well for the publication, for the presses. And we're here with you every single Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time, or 7 p.m. Eastern time, or 7 p.m. Pacific time for 1 hour live across Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you are checking this out and it is not Wednesday between those time frames, that's not a big deal. Just go ahead, put your comments or your questions in the comments section. Chris and I always go back and check during the week to see if anybody's come back with any kind of questions for us. And we are more than happy to address those topics. And again, it could even be more along the lines of like topics, whether it's, you know, a revision process, how does the publishing industry work, where you should send your stuff, how you construct a pitch for an agent or an editor or a publishing house, what you need to keep in mind, whatever it is, we are more than happy to talk about it. So, cool. Awesome. I don't know. That's all I got right now.
Yeah. So, how was your weekend?
My weekend was good. I actually I went to a gathering. So at my former employer, I used to go to the gym every day. I actually still work out Monday through Friday, and we got together at a local park because one of our trainers is going to be moving. We're in the Los Angeles area, and he's going to be moving back home to San Diego. So okay. It's the first time I'd seen a lot of these folks in a year and a half. So it was pretty wild. It was awesome to see everyone. So
right.
Okay. Don McIntyre asks, what genre do you guys think is hot right now? Right now, well, what's always hot? Romance is always hot. Yeah. To be honest, thrillers are almost always hot. Thrillers have been hot for a while. Dark fiction, horror, it doesn't come and go. It's always at least on the warmer side of lukewarm, or on the warmer side of, or hotter side of warm. A lot of times, the popularity of horror is kind of dependent on like what other areas of storytelling has hot stories out. That's for any genre, by the way. So like, you know, when 50 Shades of Grey came out, all of a sudden romances and like edgier romances became super popular. When, you know, Harry Potter was enormous in the theaters, you saw that a lot of like YA fantasies became incredibly popular again. It's not that they were not popular, but it's more like it became it increased in popularity where it was more along like mainstream popular. Fantasy and sci-fi also has a pretty loyal following. So a lot of it really just depends on what kind of storytelling you're interested in. But those, generally speaking, have pretty consistent fan bases. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you on the romance and the thriller. I would say I was gonna say crime, but I think that would fall under thriller too, and that kind of subgenre. But the real big though is romance. I mean, even you can just walk into a bookstore or a convenience store or the airport or something and see kind of, you know, the small little kind of novels you see on the stands and things like that. Nonfiction is pretty popular too. I've always found, I can just say for me, nonfiction to be easier to be published. I imagine, and you can speak on this, Lisa. I imagine maybe a bit easier with book length projects as well. Because I mean, you have so many things. You have cookbooks. You have self help books. You have kind of all these things, memoir and all that stuff too. But as far as overall, I think romance takes the cake on that one, from my knowledge, uh, by a large margin. And then again, like you said, horror, um, fantasy, yeah, for sure. YA. I think you're right. I think Harry Potter came in and opened a door. Not that people weren't writing YA fantasy, but its success kind of opened the door for a lot of for that genre to grow and grow in popularity. Because I remember when it came out, and it was a huge deal, and now it's kind of uh, it's just far more popular, um, and we see it everywhere. So, but yeah, as far as that, yeah, for me, it's definitely romance takes the cake on that, by a long shot.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's interesting, like business books typically do well. Like if you're looking at it from a reader perspective, to your point, Chris, like business books usually have a steady sales. If you're asking it from an author perspective, kind of like what genres should you get into because they're hot? So all the ones we just mentioned, right? Middle grade also right now, from an author perspective, is looks like it's still doing pretty well in terms of sales. So that is something that you may want to explore. But from a business perspective, so anything like that's nonfiction, like business books, cookbooks, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You need to make sure if you're looking at it from an author perspective, so you want to sell stuff in those areas, make sure you've got a really solid platform, because what typically happens in the business side is the expectation of that publisher is that you're coming in with a big platform, which typically implies that you have a loyal following. And so with that, the implication is that that following will then buy your book. So just keep that in mind as well. And the reason I say that was, years ago I came up with, I don't know, it was supposed to be like this is like 15 years ago. This was quite a while ago. I came up with an idea to publish a nonfiction book around how Santa and his helpers are like the kings of project management. And so it was like a fun Christmas book, but it was also a business book because it's a more simplified version of project management, right? And I do have a background in project management, program management, portfolio management, all of that. But I'm not Tony Robbins, right? I'm not, some huge name within the industry. So because of that, like nobody wanted to pick it up. I actually did have some publications uh, reach out to me and say, this is a really fun idea. You should self-publish it, sell a lot of books, and then once you've sold, like I don't know, 15,000 or something like that, then send it back out to publishers again and use that as part of my platform. So that's why I know about that stuff. So yeah, again, it just depends on what area that you are looking to publish in, and yeah, and what their approach is in terms of sales.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that actually we could talk about is the importance of not being a jackass.
Yes.
And I bring this up because, I mean, this is true in any industry, but especially true in more creative businesses. I think because there's a lot of emotional content associated with anything around storytelling, whether you're a writer or a publisher or an editor or an actor or a screenplay writer or, an artist.
Right.
It can be very easy to get caught up in your own stuff and project that whatever those issues are onto other people. And you really need to be careful. The reason I say that is always keep in mind when someone's giving you feedback, or when someone's, um, well, in theory, at least, hopefully, when someone is working with you, their intentions are positive. Their intentions are to be helpful. Their intentions are to, or at least I try to approach everything from that perspective, that, any kind of feedback and any kind of guidance or whatever is intended to help you and your work become even better than what it is already.
Right.
So when you get that kind of feedback, respond in a more, with the thank you. Even if they say you don't agree with, that's okay. You don't have to agree with it, right? But at
Right.
least, be kind in your response. Because the reality is nobody wants to work with a jerk. And I'll be honest, we've had a couple of times where we had authors that, well, actually, in a few cases, I actually had to talk our editors into working with somebody because I thought the work had a lot of potential. And our editors agreed that, yes, the work had a lot of potential. And then the author turned around and was really not a very nice person and not good to work with. And because of that, no one wanted to work with him again. And so that meant in some cases when the individuals submitted us work again, we turned it down because it wasn't worth it. And in other cases, they were so difficult, I actually ended the relationship. We sadly ended up not publishing their work because we're all doing this because we believe in the stories.
Right.
Whenever we select a story, it's because we believe in the story. We believe in the individual's writing. I know, like Peter Wright, who's one of our acquisition editors, he'll be the first to comment. When he reads a piece, if he gets caught up in the voice, in the story, in the first 5 pages, he wants to pick it up, right?
Right.
And I think we're all like that. When we read those first 5, 10, 15 pages and we're like, wow, this is great. We need this. We're acquiring it because we believe in it and we believe in the potential of it. So when we acquire a piece and we start going through the editing process and the person is really difficult, right? So what, confrontational, demanding, like, I refusing to actually do anything in the editorial process. I mean, we've actually had someone before who, because everybody gets a contract when they work with us. When he got a contract, asked, "Oh, you're gonna edit this?" And it was like, well, yeah, that's normal, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're publishing with a Penguin or a St. Martin's or Running Wild, right? You're always going to be partnered with an editor who will go through your work with you. And he was like, no, you need to publish this as is. And I recommended that he, self-publish then. Because, if that's the desire, then there's no point in this, right? You should self-publish. So, and the reverse is true as well. I actually highly recommend, if you are interested in a publisher, research them, ask around, find out what it's like to work with those individuals. Before you actually get picked up by a publisher, ask to have a call with them, right? To talk through what their editing process is. Have some time to talk to the person who would be assigned as your editor. Now, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know if larger houses will do this. I mean, we do. I mean, Chris knows we do this all the time. If you ask us for one-on-one time with the editor that is you're going to be working with, we're happy to do it.
Yeah.
Because we want to make sure that this is a healthy and a collaborative relationship. And I've had times where, we brought on an editor or brought on more of like an editorial assistant. And I got feedback from authors that it wasn't a healthy relationship. And either I then coached the individual on how to better interact, or we didn't use the individual again, right? So again, it's going to always come back to, our intention is that this is going to be, you're basically joining a family. You're joining our family. And so we want this to be a healthy relationship where, we continue to work together for years to come. So if in either case, always approach it with the intent of a positive interaction, because nobody wants to work with a jerk. So
Right.
I don't know.
Nobody.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, it did. It did. Yeah, no one wants to work with one. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. It's hard to work with someone who's kind of difficult because, regardless of talent, because you can be talented, and if you're difficult, it still be unproductive,
Mm-hmm.
because things aren't flowing smoothly. Like the process isn't flowing smoothly, or smoothly enough to get things done in the time that it needs to be done. And again, it does leave a bad taste in people's mouth and can shut down potential future opportunities. And you never want to shut down opportunities before they present themselves. You
Right.
never want to do that. And that's kind of something being difficult in that aspect can do. It can definitely close the door on future opportunities that could just benefit you in a positive way. So you always got to be mindful about how you treat people. I mean, this just extends beyond writing, though. You got to be mindful about how you treat and talk to people, because nobody's going to want to deal with someone who's disrespectful to them, or um, again, counterproductive, or kind of being more stressed than adding more stress than necessary, because a book can already, that entire process can be stressful for some people already, and or the labor gone into it, and to um, add to that with unnecessary kind of crap like that, like being a jerk when you don't have to be, definitely again slows things down, makes things less efficient, and again could close opportunities before they even present themselves.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Oh well, I was gonna say something now. I can't remember.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
I mean, and to be honest, like we all have moments when we're jerks, right?
Right.
So, if you know that you're being a jerk, like just come back. Hey, I'm sorry, I was a jerk, and you find a way to open the door, but don't, regardless of talent, and two, sometimes it can also just be your personalities don't mesh, you know, and maybe expectations aren't realistic. So maybe it's not a good place to be. Maybe you should go off and try another publication or try someplace else if you feel as though it's not a good relationship, and vice versa, right? The publisher may actually make some kind of recommendation. Like I've had authors who it was clear they're very talented, they're wonderful, and I love them, but it was clear as well that they really wanted a publisher who could be full-time engaged in terms of like publicity and marketing and doing huge plans and all that kind of stuff, and we just don't have the staff for that. We one day I fully anticipate that the day will come when we will have an entire marketing and PR team And we will be able to provide services like that, but we don't have that kind of staff today. So you know, pushing the point with us and just repeatedly coming forward and saying, I want to have this huge campaign and I want to do blah, 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 and expecting that we're going to drive that campaign, it's not going to happen. I
Right.
mean, we will do everything that we can. And we actually do assign you a production manager. And we do have interns who work specifically on social media and publicity with you to help brainstorm out like what can be done. And we'll tell you exactly what we will do. But beyond that, continuously coming forward and saying that, you deserve X, Y, and Z, or you want to have all this stuff. If we've already had the conversation and we've already talked to you about what we can and can't do, and when I say can't do, I just literally mean we don't have the bandwidth. We don't have the people to do it. I've actually gone forward to individuals and said, I think you need to go to a bigger publisher. You're wonderful, but we just simply don't have the resources to do what it is that you're insisting on. And unless you're going to do it yourself, which is great, we totally back that. Um, it just doesn't make sense. So it's also that too, right? It's being realistic
Right.
in terms of what your expectations are of your publisher. And again, I'm going to keep saying this. I highly recommend going back and checking with individuals who've already worked with that publisher so that you have a better understanding and a better idea of exactly what what what's realistic and what's not realistic.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely important to. I agree with that last point to go back if you can and just check with authors who've worked with that publisher to see what their experience has been like, to see if it's pleasant, to see if it's unpleasant, to see if you know. Again, I've asked a few authors of different publishing companies about how they felt about their publisher. Some were good for this publisher or that publisher, and they were honest, and some were bad about this publisher or that publisher. And you want, one of the things about one of the publishers that one of the authors told me was that the editing, they never had time for editing. So you sit and think editing is pretty big deal, and it can have you looking really funny if you have a book in print and it's not properly edited. And this was a writer under contract. I think he told me he was under contract for like it was a bunch of books, which I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't suggest for anyone. But he was unhappy with the time he got to edit, or at least the quality of editing. So, and that's just one example. So it is definitely important to check with, if you can, find authors, reach out to them. And authors are suckers for flattery. Authors will love to talk to you about it. Um, find their social media, email, and just reach out to them politely, of course, and ask, you know, how their experience, because all they can give you is their experience. Their experience can be different from someone else's, but all they can give you is
Absolutely.
their experience. So they, will give you their experience, and then you can make an educated decision on how you want to move forward with that publisher, or if you want to move forward without that publisher. But it's definitely a good idea to reach out and ask someone. Um, if you can, to say, hey, just can you give me your experience or the lay of the land at this particular place, so that I, when submitting or when making a decision, I can make an educated decision.
Yep, and I really recommend going to multiple authors and asking their
Yeah.
experiences.
Right.
Again, just so that you get a sense of what in general people's experiences have been, and um, how that publisher works. The other thing to keep in mind, um, if you don't know anybody who's worked with that publisher before, you may again I highly recommend just going back and requesting time to walk through with that publisher what their process is, how they do things, all that kind of stuff, and then going back and going through your list of individuals who are you're friendly with, who are already published, and getting a sense from them, like if what how that publisher operates makes sense, if that, you know what I mean,
Right. Yeah.
because every publisher is going to work a little bit different, you know But you also want to be careful because you want to make sure that you want to make sure you understand what to expect. And if you're working with a traditional publisher, a hybrid publisher, one that's really a self-publisher, but maybe they don't position themselves in that way. And if it's a model that you're comfortable with, so keep
Right.
that in mind as well, if that makes sense.
Right. Right.
Cool. All right, we have 5 minutes left. So, for those of you who are watching, I'm Lisa Kastner. I am here with Chris Major, and we are here for you guys every Wednesday between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. Pacific time and 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern time. Oh, I do want to point out and if you join and it is not during that time frame, that is totally fine. All you have to do is go ahead and pop your questions in the comments section, because we always go back and check so that we can then address your questions in the subsequent Ask Us Anything. Now, what I do want to point out is that we are currently open for submissions for RIZE, for our short story anthology. This will be our first ever short story anthology through RIZE. And so what we're looking for is any kind of genre short story that is written by a person of color or another underrepresented group. Send us your work. We
Yes,
would
please.
love, 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 love to have it. You have until July 5th to send it to us. So please pass it along. We would love to read it. And as always, we are always open for full-length fiction and nonfiction. For RIZE, it is genre stories written by people of color or other underrepresented groups. And then for Running Wild, it's basically cross-genre stories. So if you've written a cross-genre piece that could be both fiction and nonfiction, which I know that sounds kind of weird, but usually it's like a memoir that has some kind of unique spin to it. We are definitely interested in it. So an example would be Suzanne Samples, her two memoirs, Frontal Matter, Glue Gone Wild, and Stargazing in Solitude. So she writes in a very, her background is poetry and flash fiction. So the style of writing is more along the lines of like flash fiction, I guess you could say. So that's what we mean by cross genre. If that makes sense. So
Yeah.
awesome. All right, guys, we've got 2 minutes. I don't know, Chris, is there anything else you can think of that we didn't cover that we should cover?
Today, no, I can't. I don't have anything. I think it was really good. Just another emphasis on kind of what we talked about with the mentors, that they are extremely important in what we do, and what you do in kind of your journey. And I would just tell people not to be too proud or embarrassed or ashamed to ask someone to be your mentor, because I mean, even if it's the sentiment is no, I can't be a mentor. It flatters people. No one is ever unhappy to be asked to be someone's mentor, whether they just agree to it or not. But I definitely wouldn't be ashamed or embarrassed or what do you call it? I wouldn't be. Yeah, I wouldn't be afraid to do something like that, because again, that relationship is important, and mentors get something positive out of that relationship too. It's not simply you taking from them; they get something positive out of it too. So I wouldn't be afraid to ask for that relationship.
Absolutely. And don't, honestly, even go out to your whatever writers organization that you're affiliated with. I'd say go ahead and check with them and see if they have a mentoring program. A lot of them do now. So I honestly, if it's the right mentor, at least I personally find a lot more value in that than in going to a writer's workshop. But everyone is different. And to Chris's point, if you already know an author or an editor who writes along the way that you want to, or it's in the stylings that you want to be in, or whatever the case may be, go ahead and ask them. You might be
Right.
surprised. They may be more than happy to be a mentor to you. So cool. All right. With that, thank you, everybody. We greatly appreciate it. And again, we will see you guys next week on Wednesday, 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Have a fabulous week, and we will see you then. Ciao.
See you.